And welcome back here for our third quarterfinal match. This is between Gerry Thompson and Ryan Fleisher. It's the 4v5 matchup in what is similar to a repeat of last weekend's finals match at SCG Baltimore. Now Gerry Thompson has added blue to his white humans deck. We'll see just what that adds.
Yeah, currently, these are the two defining decks of the formats. The third most commonly played and most powerful deck is that blue-red control deck, though these are the two you can expect to play against in multiple rounds of any standard tournament you make your way out to.
All right, now, Ryan Fleisher was the number 4 seed, which means he gets to go first in this best-of-5 match. For the first game, this is the only one without sideboards. Gerry Thompson is on the draw. He has mulliganed to 6, so players will be on an equal footing where cards are concerned.
Right, and in game one, where Gerry is just playing this blue-white humans deck, doesn't have access to things like his sideboard Gideons or Tragic Arrogance, he's going to have to win this game on the board and probably has to do it pretty fast.
Yeah, he is a stock build for the most part in the 75, or in the first starting 60.
And beyond the mulligan, bad news for Gerry with the blue splash on the humans deck. Sometimes you get these awkward draws where you don't have a basic plains in your hand. Gerry had 2 tap lands for his first 2 land plays of this game.
Yeah, so how it's gone down is good. Gerry has started the game on 2 copies of Port Town, which came into play tapped. So not only was he on the draw, but he played a turn 2 Town Gossip Monger. That is a lot of lost tempo. Now, on the plus side for Thompson, Ryan Fleisher started with a Evolving Wilds into a tapped Canopy Vista. His first play of the game is also coming late. It's a 2-drop on turn 3, but may actually be enough right now.
Yeah, Gerry does have a little bit of catch-up to do here. Looks like he did find the basic plains, which is great as he gets to finally start 2-spelling.
Yeah, so the Duskwatch Recruiter's on Ryan's side. And now Gerry on turn 3, you're absolutely right, makes some work here. He plays Thraben Inspector, getting a clue, then plays Thalia's Lieutenant to pump the team. And interestingly enough, he swings the 2/2 Town Gossip Monger, has no time to transform that one.
Yeah, I like that. If the Gossip Monger gets to flip over, say if Fleisher has land drop, leave up Collected Company, suddenly he has a 3/3 and Company on the following turn. That's really bad for Gerry, so I think he really wanted that trade there.
So Gerry does offer the trade, and Ryan takes it. So Town Gossip Mongers hits the graveyard, so does Duskwatch Recruiter. Life Totals stay at 20. We go back over to Fleisher. This is one of his copies of Nissa Vastwood Seer, the 2/2 for 3 that finds a basic forest. He'll find out of his deck, then put it into play. That'll probably be it for him.
If you're Gerry, this is actually not a bad turn for you. This is just a Gray Ogre. Fleisher might have been missing that land drop, so that's the reason. If that's the case, then he could still have Collected Companies, so maybe next turn is not as good, but immediately this turn cycle is great for Gerry.
Yeah, Fleisher's deck has just been a 2/2 on turn 3, a 2/2 on turn 4. That's really not that impressive.
Right.
And with a better draw, I think Gerry would have capitalized much harder on this.
Certainly, with a 1-drop into, say, 2 1-drops on the second turn, and then the Thalia's Lieutenant with that many creatures in play, would have been able to close this game pretty quickly.
Right, and we see here that mana catch up to Gerry again. His draw for the turn was a copy of Prairie Stream. That's the rare from Battle for Zendikar. It needs 2 basic lands to come into play untapped. So we might see a 2 tapped Port Towns and a tapped Prairie Stream hurting on Gerry's side.
Yeah, it's a tap land, and it's also a 4th land. He doesn't necessarily want either of those things.
So he's going to try to get some damage in. It's a copy of Always Watching, the signature enchantment from the deck. He will attack with a 3/4 Vigilant Thraben Inspector to deal the first 3 points of damage. But Thalia's Lieutenant is still just a 2/2, not going to be able to attack, at least until Gerry plays another human.
Right. In particular, on his following turn, if he was able to play another human and another Thalia's Lieutenant, that would be great for Gerry, though. Right now, his board is fine, but it's going to take some work to actually close this game, as Fleisher's going to start doing a lot more than just casting 2/2s on this turn.
Well, when I think about the decks, I know that the white-blue humans deck, its creatures are very cheap, and that's one of its strengths. But the Bant Company deck's creatures are very efficient. You know, for 3 mana, you get a ton of things. If it's turn 5 now and Ryan's at 17, even though Ryan's board is rather small, this still seems like a win for the Bant Company player.
Right. There is pressure on him to start playing creatures where he can double block this 3/4 Thraben Inspector, though most of the deck is just that. So it's not hard to have those cards.
Shields are going up for Fleisher. He played a tapped Lumbering Falls as his 5th land and then had a pair of 2-drops. This is Sylvan Advocate and another Duskwatch Recruiter. With 5 lands, the Advocate will power up to a 4/5 next turn if Ryan has the land drop for it.
Right, and Advocate, that won't cleanly be able to tussle with this Thraben Inspector and win in combat on its own.
Yeah, Gerry Thompson, we're back over to his side. 3-4, not quite big enough.
It is also really good that Fleisher had 2 different 2-drops to play this turn. If it were something like double Advocate and Gerry were to untap and have Declaration in stone,
Oh, that could be really bad.
that would be huge.
It feels like all of Ryan Fleischer's creatures are going to be played as though they had Defender this game. He's just not going to attack until he has an overwhelming board advantage.
Right, he's just not able to try to play as the aggressor in this matchup. He has to be the control.
Oh, Gerry's creatures are always watching again, and here comes Thraben Inspector with Vigilance. So now the little 1/2 has been pumped 3 times. It's all up to a 4/5. Even so, this could cleanly trade with one of Ryan's creatures if he's willing to give away the Advocate.
Yeah, Fleischer's blocks here are
It's
not very exciting
Yeah,
because the Inspector replaces itself on top of the fact that it's just a 4/5.
Yeah, I guess if he wanted to kill it, he could triple block. That's what it would take. So he's going to take the 4 damage, and Gerry will follow up with a copy of Kythian. That's the 2/1 that turns into, well, Planeswalker. It'll put a counter on Thalia's Lieutenant, pumping that creature also up to a 4/4. Despite the slow start, this double always watching has helped Gerry's creatures keep pace with the green deck.
Yeah, suddenly there's more pressure on Fleischer's deck to do more than just get a bunch of 2/3s. Now he has to concern himself with dying and making horrible blocks.
Ryan on his turn will pass. No plays. That means the Duskwatch Recruiter turns into the Kralin Horde Howler. It's a 3/3 that makes his creatures cheaper. Also, he's left up enough mana for a number of things. He has a Lumbering Falls in play he could activate. And let's not forget that the card Archangel Avacyn is a 2 of in Fleischer's deck.
Right. Without the Advocate being active, as it were, the Lumbering Falls probably not what's on Gerry's mind here. He's thinking, is it Company or is it Avacyn?
Yeah, you're right. The Falls is still a 3/3, at least until Fleischer gets a 6th land.
It could also be Bounding Krasis, which is best case scenario for Gerry, but Gerry's not going to play it like it's Krasis.
Yeah, Krasis, the 3/3 that taps a creature. That would, if that creature won't, it won't surprise Gerry. He'll go to an attack, a creature will get tapped. That would be an acceptable loss.
Certainly.
And this is an interesting attack. Gerry looks like he's just going to attack with the Kythian.
Yeah, so the Kythian has the ability to make itself indestructible. So this attack here just says
It's free.
Anything that you block with is going to get killed by this Kythian.
Wow, and on Thompson's side, he really sniffed out the trick. It was a copy of Archangel Avacyn. Ryan will flash it into play. And if you were worried about Avacyn, this was the best attack for Gerry.
Definitely. So Fleischer gets to block the Kythian, but Gerry just gets to make it indestructible, and this is much less damage than an Avacyn has the potential to actually do.
Yeah, he'll put some creatures in front of Kythian. Interesting, so all his creatures are indestructible this turn thanks to the Avacyn trigger. So this is going to be everything's indestructible, no creatures die. And actually looking at the board, if a creature dies, normally that Avacyn becoming a Purifier, which when she flips, she deals 3 damage to Gerry and all the other creatures on the board, Ryan's as well. That's normally excellent against white-blue humans, but with double always watching, I'm not even positive Ryan wants us to flip anymore.
Yeah, it would take care of the Kythian or force Gerry to use 3 mana to make it indestructible.
Yeah.
And it would clean up his Nissa and his 3/3.
So Avacyn will attack. Gerry goes to 16. Ryan, Avacyn really doing everything here. Not only does she block, she also is the win condition.
She slices, she dices, attacks, blocks, plague wins. She does it all.
It's back over to Thompson. Still no 6th land for Ryan. That's got to be a win if you're a Gerry Thompson fan. When he hits that 6th land, the Advocate will become a 4/5, and that Lumbering Falls threatening a 5/5 hexproof.
Yeah, that extra land changes the game. Also, the Sylvan Advocate currently a 2/3 if Gerry could find a way to flip Avacyn. Unfortunately, with blue and white, you don't just have, say, Doomblade or Lightning Bolt effects. The white removal is very good, but it doesn't, quote, kill anything.
All right, a Declaration in stone. Talking about white removal, Gerry has one in his hand. And who will he encase in stone? Why, none other than Avacyn herself. She turns into a clue token. And now he'll cast Collected Company. This is when Gerry goes to combat. So it's cast now because maybe he's hoping to hit a Bounding Krasis?
Yeah, Krasis to tap something down. That's the primary motivation for doing it right now. Normally if your deck, say, doesn't have Krasis, you might want to get some surprise blockers in and catch creatures in combat. And part of the issue with that, of course, even on this board, is that Gerry just has 2 always watching, so your surprise blockers don't necessarily amount to much.
Big find for Ryan. Collected Company hits 2. It's a second Sylvan Advocate and a copy of Reflector Mage. The Mage will bounce Kithian to Gerry's hand, and now Gerry gets to go to attacks. This second Sylvan Advocate, this 6th land from Ryan is becoming so important.
Yeah, the sixth land drop would be an amazing draw. The Reflector Mage was quite good for Fleisher as well. The Kithian is the only creature that can attack with impunity in Gerry's board. Now his attacks just aren't really good at all.
All right, Gerry going to go the card advantage route. This is one of the more interesting parts of his list. He's going to cast the 3-drop. This is Bygone Bishop. It's the rare from Shadows over Innistrad. He has 2 in his main deck. 2/3 flyer. Whenever Gerry casts a creature spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, which is, well, almost all of them, he'll get a clue token.
So there's some text on that card. The most important line right now, flying. Bygone Bishop is a 4/5 with Vigilance. Flyer.
Yeah.
Lumbering Falls with another land could be a 5/5, but doesn't have reach or anything like that.
We go to Fleisher's side. We mentioned Fleisher is trying to put together this wall, right? Just trying to keep everything on defense. Well, Bygone Bishop's going to pose a problem there. For Fleisher, though, land 6 is Prairie Stream.
Now Fleisher starts to have some attacks that are worth looking at with the Advocates or the Lumbering Falls.
Well, the Advocates are 4/5s, and both Thraben Inspector and Bygone Bishop are 4/5s. I'm not sure he has an attack yet.
What he really wants is a Dromoka's Command. To
get one of those always watchings off the board.
Not only that, but also just now he makes a creature fight one of Gerry's creatures on top of that. It would shrink its...
Yeah, you're right. He could kill the Bishop and an always watching. It'd be great.
Right, make the Bishop down to a 3/4 because the enchantment's no longer in play and just fight it to death.
3 copies of Dromoka's Command in Fleisher's list. None that we know of in his hand, however. So we go back over to Thompson. He'll replay the Kithian, get a clue token from the Bygone Bishop.
If there was a Dromoka's Command in hand, we'll either be seeing it soon or we would have seen it by now.
There's not, but there is another Collected Company, and you know, we were warning you about this with the Bant Company decks. They really make a mess of things. Now looking for his 6th and 7th creatures.
Yeah, we've talked about how Gerry got pretty clever with his sideboard. He has a deck that's built to be able to go long against the Bant Company deck in post-sideboard games. In Game 1, though, for sure, the longer the game goes, the more it's going to favor Fleisher.
Looking at the top 6. Looking at the creatures in his deck he doesn't have. He doesn't have a copy of Tireless Tracker yet. And he'll go with the Lizard and the Wizard. This is Bounding Crisis and Jace Vryn's Prodigy.
That's a really good package, and suddenly...
Yeah, how many Collected Companies are in Ryan's graveyard?
If Fleisher's attacks were looking okay before, they're starting to look like they could be excellent.
Yeah. The Lizard will tap down Bygone Bishop as he bounds into play. Tets takes away Gerry's really only good attacker here.
And the choice with their... the Wizard we went with Jace, it looks like, not Reflector Mage. That's a different Wizard.
Yeah, there's multiple. When they have Deathmist Raptor, there's multiple Lizards, too. It's just the theme of the deck.
He's kind of going off theme.
Oh, he got Wizard Lizard. That's great.
Well, his play was correct, but his deck is not soundly built.
You're right. There are no Deathmist in Fleisher's list today. So Thompson will cast Stasis Snare. This is targeting Jace Vryn's Prodigy. I think he sees the number of Collected Companies in that graveyard, and that's got to be it.
The only reason that he's struggling in this game is because 3 copies of that card were cast. A 4th could just drive it home for Fleisher.
A clue token still in play for Fleisher from that Declaration in Stone. He has 2 mana up, so he may get more cards. And that's one of the impressive parts about this Bant Company deck. Between Jace, the Duskwatch Recruiter, there's just so many incidental avenues of card advantage.
And indeed, cheating on mana a little bit.
Yeah, this is great. So Krallenhard Howler, this is the flipped version of Duskwatch Recruiter. Creature spells cost you 1 less. So we go to Gerry's end step. Ryan flashes in another Bounding Crisis, taps another of Gerry's blockers. Now has this army, and by the way, the Howler has flipped back to Duskwatch Recruiter, which is convenient because Ryan's run out of cards.
Right, and with 6 lands in play, that not only turns on Sylvan Advocate, but gives him 2 activations of the Recruiter.
Is this might even be 16 damage here. I mean, I haven't counted it through, but it's a lot.
I can't imagine that there will be no attacks on this turn.
Yeah, it's going to be Reflector Mage, Bounding Krasis, the other Bounding Krasis, both 4/5 Sylvan Advocates. I don't know if Recruiter or Nissa will join the attack. Ryan's debating it. I mean, keep in mind also that Lumbering Falls is a 7/7 from the two Advocates. Yeah, and it's just going to be everyone.
Well, yeah, we're past the phase where the Lumbering Falls could be awoken and rumble here, but everyone else. I like leaving back activations on the Recruiters as well.
All right, reconsider the vanilla 2/2s, the Nissa and the Duskwatch Recruiter. They're going to stay home, at least for now. We'll let you know when this attack is final.
Yeah, want to take your time in these high-stakes matches.
Not an easy board. You know, both players have 6 or 7 creatures. Things become difficult.
Certainly. This board was difficult before they had that many creatures.
Well, I think what's interesting from the Bant side is he has so much card advantage that the question of when to stop at defending and start attacking is really it can be gray.
And yeah, a lot of players, they might wait until they have an outright lethal attack. The best way to navigate is going to be figure out exactly when you can give up the least amount of value. You stay alive enough on the board with enough creatures in play where your attacks make their attacks bad and close the game.
So here is the swing. It looks like the attack was everyone from Ryan. I like it, the decisive change of role.
I think he's far enough ahead that we're just at the everyone point.
Yeah, 13 to 16. It's not, if Ryan were at 5, maybe he'd have to wait until he had an overwhelming presence. But
Right.
he could even take, he can take it hit back. And, also after Gerry blocks, Ryan has another copy of Archangel Avacyn.
Seems to me like that should have made the everybody decision a little bit easier.
Well, yeah, now it's... I guess if you don't lose any of your creatures, this looks pretty good.
That was a lot of posturing, Fleisher. I'd feel a little slow-rolled if I was Gerry.
Gerry drops to 1 on the block. Only makes safe blocks. He's kept all his creatures in play. He'll now have to deal 13 through 3 blockers. I can't imagine Gerry will survive another attack.
A Declaration in Stone would be huge here for Gerry. Get rid of both of the Sylvan Advocates. If you're a Gerry fan, you really want him to have that card. So that would leave the Avacyn as a blocker, so that jumps in front of a 4-power creature, and then he would have 8, 12. So he would need Declaration in Stone plus some way to make one of his creatures larger, an unblocked creature. I think that Gerry is coming up a little bit short, even with, it doesn't look like he has the stone anyway.
He only has 2 cards. I think it's Knight of the White Orchid and Basic Plains. That's
very far from what he needs here. So
he's wondering, at this point you're contemplating what? How could Ryan screw up? How could I win if he does?
Yeah, he doesn't have an avenue to win on this turn or really to make a very aggressive attack. Double checking how many creatures he's going to have to line up against Fleischers, but at 1 life, he's too far behind.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, with that Lumbering Falls, Fleisher has 9 attackers, Gerry with 4 blockers. And game 1 will go over to the Bant Company player, taking that one on the play.
Yeah, being on the play definitely mattered, and Gerry's Game 1 deck is a lot worse in this matchup than his Game 2 deck, so this is where we see Gerry's big advantages start to come into the deck.
All right, so now down the hall, we're going to talk about Gerry Thompson. We said, I think the whole panel's picked to win the tournament, off to a rocky start here in our top 8 coverage. The player here, one of the only 2 players to ever win multiple Star City Games Invitationals. You know him pretty well. Originally from Elk River, Minnesota. 31, he has 20 open top 8s. And what I really am impressed with is the conversion rate here. 5 wins of 20 top 8s. 6 invitational top 8s, 2 wins. Really has just been the dominant force, probably the most dominant force the SCG Tour has had.
Oh yeah, no question about it. Back when there were opens on Saturday and Sunday, he was the only player to ever go back-to-back on winning those events. Very impressive player.
See that, and looking for his 3rd invitational finish, invitational championship. Mentioned the whole 6 top 8s. Now, one of the ways he has done this is based on his ability to metagame against the top decks in the format. Frequently, he shows up with tools that players are not expecting that have been specifically sharpened to beat the top players in the format. Now, I want to talk about his sideboard. We talked about it a bit in the pregame. We see it here. What is the strategy that he's been looking to do against Bant Company?
So the really interesting thing about having this sideboard strategy and having it face up, Fleisher knows that you're doing something. He doesn't know exactly what. So I think that we're going to see Gerry maneuver in and out between different sideboarded games. Big haymaker he has is Dragon Lord Ojutai. This card combines exceptionally well with Always Watching. And the thing about this matchup in general is flyers break it wide open, so those I imagine will just be in for the rest of the match. You have the option to bring in Negates to compete with both Collected Company and also Dromoka's Command to destroy your Always Watching. Could be a spell that's worth countering. A Tragic Arrogance can catch up in board states like the board state that we saw in Game 1. That would catch him up there. The extra By God Bishop for sure is coming in. I think that Ojutai's Command is an option. It's not one that I'm especially excited about.
It didn't seem like there are that many creatures to counter here out of Fleisher. You know, his creatures cost 3 or less, and then he plays Collected Company on 4. I guess Fleisher did play 2 Avacens, right?
The big one is Archangel Avacen, and for that reason, I would certainly consider bringing in at least 1 copy of the Ojutai's Commands.
So, Silk Wrap, that seems great here, I think. It hits all of Ryan's cards.
Yeah, it goes 1 for 1. If Gerry has the draws, even with all these cards coming in, he still has to leave in a lot of creatures that are just attacking and blocking. So the Silk Wrap will be a good, important tool for winning the fast games.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. We'll see just how he plays with this game plan. Gerry had, according to teammate Todd Anderson, we were talking with him, his plan was to go under on the play and go over when he's on the draw. He's going to be on the play for Game 2, so we'll see what he chooses to do. Now, keep in mind, we have the Invitational this weekend. We're going to go all the way through our quarterfinals today, and there is a lot on the line for the players who've top-aided here. First of all, $10,000 prize point to the winner, along with 50 SCG points for those players. That has made the difference. Even with a top 8 finish in the 30 points you see there, Gerry Thompson has got enough to claim one of those top 3 spots on the SCG Tour for Season 1. Congratulations to him. We will see him in Roanoke in December to compete for the Players' Championship. Now, there's more on the line. You see here prizes throughout all of the top 8 as well. Now, there are other things, though, that we're giving away. First of all, we said that Players' Championship invite. The player who wins the Invitational gets a direct invite to the Players' Championship, no points needed. They get an invite to Magic Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. That's happening in Sydney, Australia in a few months. Also, they get their art on a personalized token of their choice. So that one's pretty interesting. We have a lot of tokens in some of these decks in the top 8. Most recently, we saw Caleb Shear pick a Storm token, one that counted Storm counters. Now, sometimes we get creatures, Alex Bestecki last year, for example, choosing a Germ token at the previous Invitational. Alion Trazi with an Angel token as well. So we've seen a lot of great artwork coming out. SCG's own Kristen Plesko illustrating those so very well. And those will be given out during Season 2 at our Star City Games Opens and Classics.
And then with regard to bullet point number 1 here, if you're a Gerry Thompson fan and he has no shortage of those, of course you want him to win the event. If you're a Joe Lissette fan,
yeah, so Joe Lissette entered today 2nd place in the Players' Championship race. Now, he currently sits in 4th. He was passed by both Andrew Tenjum and Gerry Thompson, who locked their Players' Championship spots this weekend. If Gerry Thompson wins this Invitational, that is the one way that Joe Lissette can still get that invite.
You have to imagine that Joe is just watching this coverage right now.
I would be.
On edge.
Or I would be too stressed out to watch it. I'd either be watching it or I'd want to be nowhere near Magic.
I would just be in a hole somewhere waiting for it to be over.
Just someone tell me. Just someone tell me when it's over.
I would like to fast forward to Monday, please. Let me know if it'll be a good Monday or a bad one.
Yeah, I had to, as I remember, back when I was playing on Pro Tour, to the Rookie of the Year race, I had to spend the entire Sunday wishing for certain results to happen. And just
that was a really
them.
tight race when that
happened. It was 1 point over the guy in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and so I needed a bunch of results to happen all at the same time, and I was already, I hadn't made the final day of competition, so I was just, that was a stressful day considering how little Magic I played.
Certainly.
It was, yeah.
It's never fun when your fate is in somebody else's hands.
Team Japan came through for me at that one. That was big. They had to beat Team Norway.
I mean, not knowing what specific players we're referring to, the Japanese have a very strong contingent.
No, it turned out it was Makahito Mahara. I needed him to win his match.
Oh,
and it was great. It was great. I was just a Hall of Famer. No, I was in good hands, okay? And it worked. but it was still stressful. I mean, Joe, if that's cheering for Gerry Thompson, he's got a good horse in this field,
Definitely.
It doesn't make it less stressful, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, at the last Invitational, Joe Lissette in the top 8. There were some Players' Championship implications for last year where Joe Lissette had to close the top 8 for somebody else to get in, and he had just this abysmal quarterfinal matchup. It both had to be that a different player had to win
There was
a different
big flow
quarterfinal.
chart.
Yeah, and then Joe had to win the tournament for somebody else to squeak in. It was for Eric Hawkins. He needed a specific 2 quarterfinals and a specific Joe winning the tournament, and then Joe just like 0-3 to his quarterfinal.
If you're gonna do that to me, do it quickly.
Yeah. Well, at least we're done. I'll be at the bar. All right. So players, looks like Gerry mulliganing down, wasn't able to find a good mix here.
Yeah, he was on 6 cards as well in the first game. Now, when he's on the play, I wonder if that will matter as much. If he can blitz his opponent, so to speak, it may not matter that he's down a card. You know, we saw that start from Fleisher where his play was turn 3 Duskwatch Recruiter, turn 4 Nissa Vastwood Seer. I would think most of Gerry's draws can defeat that.
Depending on how he's sideboarded, he could have a draw that could be very aggressive here. If that's his strategy, sometimes he will be bitten by some of these sideboard strategies, but the option is still there.
And these lands just coming back to hurt Gerry. He starts the game on Prairie Stream, and you see Port Town at the front of his hand. This is the second game in a row that these dual lands have done a number on him. Looks like he does have a basic plane, so we'll reveal Port Town and cast Thalia's Lieutenant on an empty board. Well, it's a 2-drop, so he's got that. But
Champion of the Parish was a playable card in its own time.
it did cost 1.
Well, sure. You can't have everything.
Good, we'll play it at 2.
I'm saying in play, this card is totally reasonable.
Well, Ryan will have a Duskwatch Recruiter. That one right on time this time, turn 2. If Gerry can play 2 humans, he can swing past us.
Yep, that would
Tall
be
order, but
Is it a tall order? There's only like 40 humans in the deck?
Well, he didn't really have a 1. I mean, he'd have to have a 1-drop and a 2-drop, which. Or at Thalia's Lieutenant counts twice. It's a human and it puts a counter on the human. So,
It'll
3-3.
be a tall order, he says. Does it in
It's
one
easy,
card.
1 card. Now, Gerry did not play the planes in his hand this turn. That's interesting. So it says if he draws further Port Towns, he wants them to come in and play untapped.
Well, that could be it, but more likely Jerry's next turn play will be a Knight of the White Orchid.
Oh, okay. So he wants to get behind on lands for card advantage.
Correct.
You know, when I'm playing an aggro deck, that's usually not the first thing on my mind. It's more interesting because Ryan knows. Well, we'll see what happens. Ryan uses Dromoka's command to put a counter on his own recruiter and fight down Gerry's lieutenant. Swings into even life totals at 17. Now, Ryan could play a game of cat and mouse and skip his own land drop.
Yeah, but Jerry's deck is much better at operating on 2 lands
Yeah,
than
I don't know if I want to get into
Fleischer's
that fight.
deck. Right. Fleischer wants to get to 4 mana as soon as possible. Cast as many as collected companies as he can, as fast as he can.
So we go back over to Thompson. A 3-3 on each side of the board. We'll see if that Knight of the White Orchid is going to come into play. You're right. I have to imagine that's why he skipped his land drop.
Anything but that would be pretty wild.
Maybe he's bluffing Knight of the White Orchid.
That would be among the strangest bluffs I have seen in my life, but I wouldn't put, I wouldn't take Gerry off of that.
Raven Inspector pumps the lieutenant.
So I'm still
And a
not
swing.
on this being a bluff, but Gerry will be able to play Knight and find a land next turn as Fleischer plays a 4th land.
And he will Declaration and Stone away the Duskwatch Recruiter. I don't think he has the Knight.
Okay, maybe it is a bluff. If that worked, it would be
what does the bluff
phenomenally.
do?
So the bluff would entice Fleischer to not curve into his 3-drop into his collected company on turn 4. You try to keep him off playing an additional land, but I can't imagine many players just skipping a land in that situation.
Could it be, wait, if Gerry's curve is set up in such a way that this is his play next turn, whether he has 3 lands or 4 lands in play, it doesn't matter, right?
Mm.
Then why not skip the land because, hey, I might top deck my Knight of the White Orchid, and it just doesn't matter.
That's also a fair point.
That is not a play that 90% of people make. That is
99%.
90, yeah.
Whatever the rounding error is when you account for Gerry Thompson.
You go back over to Fleischer. Now creatureless at 13. He will play a face-down morph. He had land 4, but it is a Canopy Vista. Now, something we can say about the Bant Company deck, it has its own set of mana problems. Its lands really can come into play tapped.
Yeah, and in some games you can find yourself even off-color in these 3-color mana bases in New Standard.
You go back over to Thompson. His hand is Plains, Port Town, and I believe Stasis Snare. Didn't really want that 5th land. He has a clue token in play, though. He decide, if he has a Stasis Snare, does he just have to hit this morph?
Well, you have options that lead you to mana inefficiency one way or the other. You can pop the Clue and hope you find a 2-mana spell, or you can play the Stasis Snare and then you'll have an extra mana hanging out with your land drop. So I like going for the target. You assume that this card is a Den Protector, and if it's a Hidden Dragon Slayer, then you really want to hit it because it can just kill your Thalia's Lieutenant.
So he will Stasis Snare away the Den Protector, swings for 4, puts Ryan down to 8. Ryan gets land 5. You know, not playing that land before is hurting Gerry here. He could have cracked the Clue there. Ryan with a card out of his own sideboard. It's a copy of Planar Outburst. Destroying all the creatures. We go back to Thompson.
So both players getting a little bit more controlling, perhaps.
Gerry, 2 lands in hand. He'll crack that Clue. He draws a flip card. All right, he has some game. That 8. He's got Ryan down low, but he looks like a really large number right now. It's like Town Gossip Monger.
Okay, there's a different flip card for the rares and the commons.
Yeah, so we know it's not Archangel Avacyn.
Right. Gossip Monger, dramatically worse.
Yeah, I'd rather have Avacyn here. I have to say, 8 with my opponent at 8.
Yeah, you probably think that because it's not turn 1 of the game.
That's true. That's true. Generally, on turn 1, I prefer to have Gossip Monger.
Yeah, but like at most 1.
Gerry doing that. He's also not holding his last 2 cards there, both basic lands. It's an island and a plains. He doesn't want Ryan to know that.
Oh, certainly not. If Ryan smells weakness, you know, it's possible that he'll be holding back creatures so that he can leverage, say, his other copy of Planar Outburst. And Gerry just really does not want to fall super far behind while his hand is just a bunch of bricks.
Land 4 for Fleisher. Collected Company, 2 mana up. Here we go. Gerry's got to. If this one hits hard enough, it's going to be lights out.
Yeah, Gerry's pretty much hoping for a miss exactly.
Bounding Crisis. And just Bounding Crisis. That, you know, that's about as good as Thompson can hope for.
Right. It was just as if he drew a
sorcery
Bounding Crisis itself. Yeah.
And it was sorcery speed. It's a Hill Giant. This is. I mean, Gerry still needs help, but, you know, this could have been Nissa Vast with Seer Reflector Mage, in which case, bleh.
Right.
Dromoka's command, the lizard will fight the Gossip Monger, and more importantly, the enchantment will be sacrificed, so a Den Protector added to Fleischer's side.
That was a good swing. Gerry really wants to find Dragon Lord Ojutai or an Archangel Avacyn here.
His draw was another land, so now have 5 lands in play, 2 in hand will pass back.
If Gerry's lucky, Fleischer will play around Avacyn and not make the most aggressive attack possible, though the jig's going to be up pretty quick on that one.
Back to Fleischer. Has that Lumbering Falls in play. A lot of options available. Now, he's got to be scared of Avacyn right now, I would think. Gerry just played a 5th land.
Right. It would be pretty surprising if Fleischer got too aggressive on this turn. He only has 2 creatures anyway, can only kill 1, so I suppose the attack is totally fine one way or the other. In particular, if he had a Dromoka's command, he could just use that to trade the lizard right off.
Here's a swing for 5. This is kind of calling the Avacyn bluff. He'll learn one way or another whether or not the angel is in Gerry's hand.
Yeah, he would have found out at an end step, but you can't just mess around while Gerry's not doing anything if he doesn't have it, right?
Yep, Gerry goes to 12. All right, signs indicate no angel.
Yeah.
Duskwatch Recruiter for Fleischer.
So the big thing for there is that the Avacyn would certainly deter him from attacking with the Lumbering Falls.
Draw for Gerry is another Prairie Stream. 8 lands in this 22-land deck. That's not going to play here.
No, that's not how we drew it up at all.
And the second game will also go the way of Fleischer. So now in a 2-0 hole, we've seen 2 rather uninspiring hands from Thompson. Both mulls to 6 that didn't really get out of the gates. Gerry has work.
Yeah, both times kind of awkward things with the lands happening. Game 1, a bunch of lands coming into play tapped, and even too many lands arguably in that game. Game 2, way too many lands.
All right, so we talked about Gerry's transformational sideboard here. At least in that game on the play, it looks like he didn't use too much of it. Look at some of the things that Ryan has done. We saw the 2 copies of Planar Outburst. The Planar Outburst looked very good that game.
Certainly. Yeah, one of the ways that Fleisher loses this match is those games where Gerry gets very far ahead on board. So the outburst helps him check those kinds of draws.
So keep in mind, we have 2 more quarterfinals to go. This one, Ryan Fleisher up 2-0 on Gerry Thompson. After the conclusion of this match, we will bring you over to the Bant Company mirror. That's between Logan Mize and Craig Krempels. It's really a bunch of fireworks over on that side between 2 great players. They're currently starting game 2. Craig Krempels taking game 1 over Logan Mize.
Yep, it'd be very surprising if that match wasn't still going on after this one were over.
If you like the decks you see here, you're going to get a chance to play them. This weekend coming up, Star City Games is happy to announce both states in Standard and Modern.
On April 23rd and 24th, don't miss the StarCityGames.com State and Provincial Championships. With Standard on Saturday and Modern on Sunday throughout the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico, there are plenty of chances to become a champion. Every player that registers receives an exclusive art print, top 8 competitors receive an exclusive playmat and pin, and each champion receives a championship playmat, medal, and an invitation to any of the next 3 StarCityGames.com invitationals. Each event will also include an oversized token door prize customized with their location. Visit go.starcitygames.com/states to learn how to become a champion today.
All right, so we have those coming up next weekend. That's during the Pro Tour, both Standard and Modern. You can play all your favorite decks from the Invitational here. For Gerry Thompson, a dominant Modern performance, playing a blue-white Thopter control deck.
Yeah, that deck is really sweet, and I think Gerry is onto something. We talked to him about that deck a little bit earlier in the weekend. One thing that he said, and he said, of course, it was really obvious, the difference between the Thopter deck than the extended deck that he used to play, not just a Dark Depths combo, but also the fact that Chrome Mox is not Modern legal.
Yeah, it is. Those really fast combo turns do lose.
Yeah, sometimes you just play turn 2 Sword of the Meek, turn 3 Thopter Foundry, and you're actually just dead on turn 3 or turn 4.
For Ryan Fleischer's trip to the top 8, you could describe him as being a company man, playing Bant Company in Standard. Oh yeah, come on, that was good. That was good.
It was medium.
Abzan Company was his deck of choice in Modern as well. Him and Logan Mize actually the exact same decks, both in the top 8. So maybe there's something to that. Maybe you should get your playset at Eclectic Companies if you haven't.
I haven't looked at the breakdowns, but just from walking the floor, those seem to be the 2 most common choices by format, and they're certainly great decks. There's a reason that so many people were playing these decks.
What I've liked about Abzan Company is it reminds me, not just in the approach, but of the Birthing Pod decks, where it is actually this surprisingly resilient fair game deck that then when you get in a combo mirror, just sometimes turn 3s people.
Right. It is really wild how different the game plans can be. One thing that we saw highlighted throughout this tournament was that Kitchen Finks isn't just a combo piece, it's a card that wins games of Magic.
Yeah, we had an Andrew Tenja match where we just played a bunch of Kitchen Finks against a Burn player. That won without any combo anything.
Yeah, well the combo was Kitchen Finks, and Kitchen Finks.
Yeah, it turns 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah,
it was
they
very,
came together
very
quite
strong.
well, right.
It was good against the opposing Goblin guides.
Yeah, we saw.
I know,
it was quite good against them. We saw Gerry spend a little bit of time on sideboarding here going into Game 3, and it's exactly like we were talking about. He's going to be tinkering with these pieces a lot just to keep Fleischer guessing. And also, as you see how Fleischer is sideboarded, Gerry saw Planar Outburst in Game 2, so that's something he has to be considering going into Game 3.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense here.
Yeah, so if Gerry didn't like having Negate before, it probably seems even better now. I assume it was already in, at least in some number.
Well, he knew about the sideboard because we are playing in a top 8 here, so you mean because of the Planar Outburst?
Right. Well, you see, Fleischer knows how Gerry is sideboarding. So the question is, are both players going controlling, or is Fleischer just going to play this mid-range game against your aggro deck? Is he bringing in the Wraths when he knows that Gerry is going bigger?
It may just be that Fleischer plays his mid-range game plan and puts in a couple Planar Outbursts for good value. I don't know that he goes all the way to starting to board in all these kill spells, up to all these 3 Declaration and Stones.
Right, and his deck is very capable of doing it. It's like a lot of draft decks, sometimes, you're not going to pass Wrath of God. And you'll play a deck with a bunch of creatures, and then sometimes you just cast it. Your opponent makes an attack, you're like, I'm going to block a bunch.
You'll say, wait, you can't cast a sweeper in your creatures deck. And you're like, well, here's what I'll do. If I have a sweeper, I'll look at the board, and if it's bad for me, I won't cast it.
Exactly.
But because you are the person with your hand on the trigger, you get to pick it. And, it's not going to be bad for you.
Right. You're either going to be able to play a bunch of creatures and win that way, or that's not working out, you reset.
Game 3 about to start here between Ryan Fleisher and Gerry Thompson. 2-0 currently in favor of the Bant Company player. And for Gerry Thompson, it's his first, real start here. Port Town on the play, showing a Plains playing Thraben Inspector.
I never thought I'd see the day where having the one-mana 1/2 was the normal start.
It's an Elvish Visionary. It's a good Elvish Visionary.
Yeah, this card is surprisingly good. I've been very impressed by it. As Thraben Inspector, I prefer to call it Inspector Clouseau. I have heard some people say Inspector Gadget, but Inspector Gadget does a lot of different things, right? Inspector Clouseau is kind of clumsy. All he does is find clues. Inevitably, he'll solve a mystery. I think that works a lot better for this card. I'm locking in Inspector Clouseau as the proper nickname.
He does make a clue. I do like that.
Yeah.
History with a great share of inspectors to choose from.
I'm specifically going for just one. I don't think that there's much of a conversation. If there's like a really good inspector, there's no good argument for it being a one-mana 1/2.
So Thompson, no turn 2 play as we go over to Fleisher, who plays Sylvan Advocate. Gerry will draw a card. Now say turn 1, Thraben Inspector, turn 2, draw a card. That's a play I really like in Limited. Let's see how it pans out for Gerry in Constructed.
It is a bit more common and powerful and limited to do
what
that.
I think is interesting that Gerry had some choices of 2-drops, but it looks like instead what he's trying to play a slower game plan. Rather than just playing 1, 2, 3 on creatures, he can play into Bygone Bishop on 3 and then start getting all his creatures to clue token for him.
Right. The Bishop, when you've already cast your 2-drop, you throw away some cards, you can cast in it to find some clue tokens. He has to figure this game is going along.
Yeah, this is a longer game plan. So no swing with Thraben Inspector, plays the Bygone Bishop and passes back. So now we'll see if Fleisher has something like a Dromoka's Command or a Declaration in Stone. If not, Gerry will get to make a lot of clues.
Right. The Dromoka's Command would almost certainly be the play here. There is some temptation to hold on to it to deal with something like an Always Watching down the road, but the Bygone Bishop's going to generate a lot of value if it's unchecked. Not to mention just being a 2/3 flyer, again, matters a lot in this matchup.
Land from Fleisher, and he will just pass.
A smell.
A lizard?
A bounding crisis.
Lizards, yeah.
Smells
Lizards
like,
have a distinct smell to them.
Smells like fish, but it's actually a reptile.
It's both. Actually, bounding crisis is a fish lizard.
That seems
The
like an
cynic are
abomination.
weird. Okay.
I would not allow that in my laboratory.
Yeah.
I'm
so
disgusted.
it is. Don't tell me he's not a fish. I see water on that card, okay?
I apologize. I got overzealous in my application of not fish.
Bygone Bishop will attack. Or maybe try to attack. Looks like, okay, he'll attack and Gerry pass. This is interesting. Bygone Bishop attacks, Gerry passes the turn. Fleisher on instep plays the Bounding Crisis, taps the Thraben Inspector. Looks like he wants to race.
Indeed. Gerry being very conservative here. Could be leaving up something like a Stasis Snare. Wouldn't surprise me if that was a play here for Gerry. And he's really just feeling out how Fleisher's going to play this game. He could have some of his more controlling cards like a Tragic Arrogance, and he just wants to see how much he can trap Fleisher potentially.
Gerry has cards in hand, yeah. Now, both players really pumping the brakes. So Fleisher swings back for 5, Thompson down to 15. No states there, just no plays. He didn't do anything with 3 mana.
Well, Fleisher now not doing anything with his 4 mana makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I think I know what he's up to. I haven't
don't
quite
buy
figured
that.
out what exactly. Every turn from Gerry out of this game is another little surprise.
Well, Gerry has a copy of Negate in his hand, so there is that. Looks like, okay, I see what happened. He had a Port Town last turn. He opted not to play it so that he could play Knight of the White Orchid this turn. Now he's going to play Knight of the White Orchid, get a clue off Bygone Bishop. This is a cute one. Get Prairie Stream into play with Knight of the White Orchid.
So I understand not playing Knight of the White Orchid, but Gerry has 5 or 6 cards in his hand yet, right?
Well, I think he's leaving up Negate. And the question is, how do I leave up Negate and still commit to the board? He couldn't last turn.
Sure. So the concern was on Fleischer's 4th turn, he would just main phase the Collected Company.
Right. And say he hits a pair of Reflector Mages, then the game's over, right?
Well, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. So he gets this in land. Now he still has Negate up. We'll see if now he plays the tapped Port Town. He had one last turn. Really interesting lines he's taking here. So Bygone Bishop looks like it will attack. Now we'll see if Ryan Fleischer has a company. Well, not yet. Down to 15. Port Town tap for Gerry and a pass. Here is Dramoka's command. He wants the Blizzard to fight the Bishop. Is that a good enough for Gerry to use a negate?
If he was leaving it up going into turn 4, I feel like Gerry is going to show some patience in finding a collected company, but this does start a fight over card advantage as well, so I do like negating there.
And negates the Dramoka's command. We go back to Fleisher. It seems like Gerry was building a game plan around that bygone Bishop. He wants to have it protected with negate, and he was willing to really slow down his clock in order to do it.
Right, he's able to fly over and get in chip shots, but primarily Gerry's game plan here is to keep up on cards.
A swing of 5 again from Fleisher. Because Gerry has slowed down and held up these counter spells, there is a concern that, I mean, the life totals are even. Each player has 5 power on the board. He has given up a lot of racing equity.
Certainly. It seems likely that his hand is probably not established well to race the way that he expects Fleisher to curve out. I don't think that Gerry is going to have a hand that's great at racing and just mess around and try to play a different game.
So Gerry, he's contemplating a double block on the Bounding Crisis. Now this would lose to Dramoka's command. It would basically lose the game, I think.
Dramoka's command would be intense, though this one's pretty good too.
Yeah, the Archangel Avacyn will come into play. Take care, Knight of the White Orchid. Gerry takes 2, goes to 13. It certainly is not good for Gerry here. It is better, like I said, better than Dramoka's command. That would have eaten all of Gerry's creatures there.
Right. Though the Archangel Avacyn, it's a huge threat on the table. It wasn't just a combat trick. It's a 4/4 flyer.
Yeah, we'll see if Gerry has one of his removal spells. Stasis Snare, Declaration in Stone, perhaps some sort of tragic arrogance out of the sideboard. I do think he'll need it, though, to get through this 4/4.
Right. Without them, his 2/3 flyer is no longer getting in those chip shots, and he's also just dying.
Yeah, he's behind on life points. And when Fleisher plays a 6th land next turn, the problem is only going to be compounded.
Right. Avacyn has Vigilance because why would this card not have a line of text?
Your opponent can find you. We will start the next round in about 60 seconds. Please make your way to your seats.
Back to Thompson. 5 cards in hand. Here's Council's Lieutenant. That gets him a clue. Land number 6 passes. Looks like he passes the turn. Yeah, has a copy of Stasis Snare in hand. If he's playing defensively, which I think he is, he's going to hold the Stasis Snare in case there's another Avacyn, perhaps. I mean, play it, but just be very careful about where and when he plays it.
Right. With the Avacyn still in play, that information might entice Fleisher to make a more aggressive attack. That way, yeah, if the second Avacyn is there, the other creature's be indestructible this turn, so he wouldn't be able to make good blocks.
How worried is Gerry about Avacyn becoming a Purifier?
Well, it would kill all of the other creatures on the battlefield.
Right.
And that's 3 of Gerry's, 2 of Fleisher's, and it also gives the Avacyn +2/+1 and Lava Spikes Gerry. I have to say that's not a good outcome for Gerry.
You have 50 minutes, and you may...
6th land turns Advocate into a 4/5, and Lumbering Falls will come along with it. So we see a 5/5, a 4/5, a 3/3, a 4/4. 16 points of damage attacking here. Gerry's going to be forced to make a play.
There will definitely be some blocks here, and I assume we'll be seeing that Stasis Snare on the Avacyn on top of that.
Gerry cannot afford to have her turn into the 6/5.
Unfortunately, there's no Always Watching, and the Consul's Lieutenant has not received any +1/+1 counters for any reason, so it doesn't really have any good blocks on its own. It'll have to team up with the Inspector to deal with the Krasis or the Lumbering Falls. Or just the Krasis, I guess. He's kind of in chump blocking territory otherwise. Could be thinking about Stasis Snare on the Sylvan Advocate. If you Stasis Snare the Sylvan Advocate, you deal with the 4/5, and also the Lumbering Falls is just a 3/3, but it's a tough decision.
So Thompson, instead is just going to go ahead and crack a clue. So maybe he's just going to chump away his team, hope to draw a sweeper. Yeah, it looks to be it. Takes 7. Chump blocks both the Lumbering Falls and the Sylvan Advocate. Draws another clue. Yeah, he's looking for some sort of sweeper here.
Definitely. He was not playing that turn as if the board was going to look very similar on the following turn.
Draws Port Town. A full grip here for Gerry Thompson. But
I believe I see a tragic arrogance.
Okay.
That could put Fleisher down to just Krasis, but then he still has the Lumbering Falls. And that's lethal.
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the play. Yeah, Fleischer's ready for it.
So now the Bygone Bishop would he'll keep on chump blocking duty with at least one of these creatures.
So Tragic Arrogance. This is the card out of Gerry's sideboard. It's part of his transformational plan. Is a really good sweeper, and this has been part of Gerry's game plan. Each player, Gerry chooses a permanent of each type that they get to keep. So he chooses Ryan's worst creature. That's the Bounding Krasis. Ryan loses all the other creatures. Gerry chooses his own Bygone Bishop. That's pretty good. So it takes care of Avacyn and Sylvan Advocate, but Gerry down to 6.
If Gerry is able to survive this current turn, what you really don't want to see is like, well, I guess he can't have lethal. He can't have Krasis, Reflector Mage, and activate Lumbering Falls on this turn. So the best he can do is just turn 1 or 2 creatures sideways, and Gerry will survive on 3 at least.
Thompson has been playing this Bygone Bishop control deck. That said, it's difficult. Fleischer playing Reflector Mage, bouncing the Bishop, plays a Morph, attacks with the Krasis. Thompson down to 3.
Now Thompson is untapping with at least access to 1 removal spell. If he can play a couple spells, clean up Fleischer's board, he may have turned the corner as the control deck in this matchup.
Well, you gotta be worried because Thompson is at 3 and Fleischer has a Lumbering Falls. So
Fleischer also, going forward, has access to instant speed threats, which are going to be difficult to deal with.
Well, if that Morph as a Reflector is a Den Protector getting back Avacyn is probably too much for Gerry to answer.
Right. Gerry had to deal with that this turn, hands down, and it was kind of questionable for Fleischer to play it without mana to unmorph it.
So Stasis Snare on the Den Protector, Thalia's Lieutenant, pumps Thraben Inspector. Gerry will leave up 3. I believe he has another Stasis Snare. You're kind of right there. I'm not.
I think
you may want to slow that one down if you're Ryan Fleischer.
That was way too aggressive for Fleischer, I think. Thompson has these controlling elements, but Fleischer's inevitability is very powerful, and I think he was undervaluing that by playing the Den Protector that turn.
Here is the Lumbering Falls activation from Fleischer. So that's a lethal attacker. Plays a land. The Krasis is a lethal attacker. Here's the Reflector Mage. Thompson will have to block both 3/3s to survive. He does have Stasis Snare. That'll take care of the Lizard. And I wonder if he's going to double block. Yeah, he's going to double block the Lumbering Falls. Beautiful. Goes to 1 off the Reflector Mage. He's going to take care of the creature land on Ryan's side.
Getting that hexproof.
Wow.
It's not just a hex. It's a hexproof creature and a creature land. So
hard to deal with.
Exactly. It moved it immune to targeted removal and sweepers. So that block is great.
So Gerry to 1. The Thraben Inspector trades for the Lumbering Falls. But look at how he's really just paced himself. Now we have both players running out of resources, and Gerry, though, at 1, he's sitting here with his stack of clue tokens in play. He's got a Bygone Bishop. Yeah, he'll draw a card. Oh, look at the creature.
It's going to be a lot easier for Gerry to gas back up from this point.
Here's Bygone Bishop. This card is essential to his sideboard plan. And Thalia's Lieutenant gets a clue back, puts a counter on the 2 counters on the first Lieutenant, plays a land. He's now empty-handed, passes the turn, but he has 2 clues.
Yeah, going into next turn, he'll have access to up to 3 cards, and every creature is just going to make another clue.
So as Gerry's turning the corner here, and it really looks like he is, what are the cards he needs to dodge out of Ryan's deck?
So the big draws for Fleischer are going to be more Archangel Avacyn, Collected Company. I believe there's just 1 Den Protector in the 75. Double check that. It does look like just the 1, so that's already out of the way. Fleischer can play a Planar Outburst. Gerry is able to gas back up with the clues from that board.
It could be Awakened.
It could be Awakened.
That
would just kill Gerry.
Yeah.
Wow, you're right.
All right. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen that one Awakened in Constructed, but that'd be great.
Yeah, that would be a lethal top deck.
There aren't that, but what I'm getting at is I don't think there are actually that many top decks for Fleischer. I suppose if he held on to lands here, I don't like that he played Fortified Village. He may want to hold on to a land in case he drew Tireless Tracker.
Sure, use that to be able to draw a card. That makes sense.
Yeah, the price of him hanging onto a land is pretty low, unless this is enough for Planar Outburst, Awakened mana, in which case, nope, it's got to play him.
Well, if you're Fleischer right now, I think the big thing is you're kicking yourself for playing that Den Protector face down when you didn't have to.
He has 8 lands in play, so okay, to make it lethal, he needs 1 more land in the Planar Outburst.
Okay. So
we're one turn lethal. He could do it, but the Awakened, the 4/4 would be tapped.
Yeah. It's still a very big draw.
Oh, it's great. But he's got to do it quickly. He's only at 12. And we see here Gerry just drawing cards. You see him cash out the remainder of his clues, one on the end step and then one main phase. All his creatures draw a card right now.
Right. He needs Gerry to brick when his deck does not have a lot of bricks.
Council's Lieutenant, make a clue. Thalia's Lieutenant gets bigger. This is disgusting. You're right though, that Den Protector never got a card back.
And the card it would have got back is Archangel Avacyn.
It's a good
right?
one.
Is that in the graveyard, or was that hit by an exile effect?
No, that was hit by Tragic Arrogance.
Right, yes, it was swept up that way. So yeah,
that's a good one.
It would have been phenomenal. Not just that, but also the Den Protector is an evasive creature that would have been in play.
Another creature for Thompson. It's Knight of the White Orchid. And you see those lieutenants, one going up to a 5/5, one going up to a 3/3. Now 2 more clue tokens in play from Gerry. With his bishop, it does not take long for him to get this 12-point life total just completely off the board. You see it's a swing of 8. Reflecting Rachel Chump Block.
Gerry has certainly turned the corner here. There's no question that the action is on Fleisher. He has to get something figured out.
4th land for Gerry, so now he can crack both those clue tokens. Can Ryan Fleisher land Planar Outburst? Here's the land. If he has Planar Outburst, he wins. He can awaken, and he does. Oh my goodness.
Wow.
He's going to awaken the Evolving Wilds.
The text box says catch up. The rest of the text box says win the game.
Oh my goodness. And that is the game and the match for Ryan Fleisher. Wow.
That was phenomenal.
Okay.
Gerry navigated this game so well. That top deck for Fleisher.
Oh my goodness.
Jeez.
And you wonder, I don't know if he drew the Outburst or the Evolving Wilds, but he needed them both. Not only first of all, if he had the Evolving Wilds, then what a top deck of Planar Outburst.
Yeah.
But with Outburst, it has to be a land, it can't even be Fortified Village, it can't be Lumbering Falls, it has to be a land that comes into play untapped. And I guess Evolving Wilds, though, the mana doesn't come into play untapped, the land does.
It's a really funny thing about that. It's known for being a pretty slow land, but it doesn't have summoning sickness, as it turns out.
The 9th land drop and Planar Outburst is enough in a clean sweep to send Ryan Fleisher into the semifinals.
That was wild. And I will say, I do think that Gerry navigated that game better. I will say that face-down Den Protector, the amount of advantage on the board that Gerry was able to overcome from the way that he navigated that game, that was really impressive. But, man, that top deck was huge.
When you see someone really do these really, Gerry had a lot of great sequencing there, holding up the negate for the Dromoka's command. He was really protecting this Bygone Bishop, got himself down to 1 life, figured out just how much damage he could give away without losing the game. He got himself to 1 and then turned the corner and stabilized. It was a really impressive game from Gerry. I think most players don't even get to that spot with the deck, and it's a heartbreaking way to lose it after all that effort.
Right, and when I looked at it on paper, it did look to me as if the Bant deck was favored. I give Gerry credit for being smarter than I am. I make no reservations about being better at Magic than he is, but really impressive for Fleisher to 3-0 this match.
Yeah, so it looks like we're going to have a Bant Company deck in the finals. We have Ryan Fleisher, your 3-0 winner. Now we're going to go over to our other match. This is between Logan Mize and Craig Krempels. They are the last remaining quarterfinal. We're going to join them as they begin round 3. They're currently sideboarding for the game. Craig Krempels up 2-0 over Logan Mize.